said, "Shh," or "Look," for now something was happening. There was a wooded point on the mainland a little to their right, and they all felt sure that it was just beyond that point must be the mouth of the river. And now, round that point, there came in sight a boat, which, when it had cleared the point, it turned and began coming along the channel toward them. There were two people on board, one rowing, the other sitting in the stern and holding a bundle that twitched and moved as if we were alive. Both these people seemed to be soldiers. They had steel caps on their heads and light shirts of chainmail. Their faces were bearded and hard. The children drew back from the beach into the wood and watched without moving a finger. "This'll do," said the soldier in the stern when the boat had come about opposite to them. What about tying a stone to his feet, Corporal?" said the other, resting on his oars. "Garn," growled the others. We don't need that, and we hadn't brought one. He'll drown sure enough without a stone, as long as we've tied the cords right." With these words he rose and lifted his bundle. Peter now saw that it was really alive, and was in fact a dwarf, bound hand and foot, but struggling as hard as he could. Next moment he heard a twang just beside his ear, and all at once the soldier threw up his arms, dropping the dwarf into the bottom of the boat, and fell over into the water. He floundered away to the far bank, and Peter knew that Susan's arrow had struck on his helmet. He turned and saw that she was very pale, but already fitting a second arrow to the string. But it was never used. As soon as he saw his companion fall, the other soldier, with a loud cry, jumped out of the boat on the far side, and he also floundered through the water, which was apparently just in his depth, and disappeared into the woods and the mainland. "Quick, before she drifts!" shouted Peter. He and Susan, fully dressed as they were, plunged in, and before the water was up to their shoulders, their hands were on the side of the boat. In a few seconds, they had hauled her to the bank and lifted the dwarf out, and Edmund was busily engaged in cutting his bonds with the pocket knife. Peter's sword would have been sharper, but his sword is very inconvenient for this sort of work, because you can't hold it anywhere lower than the hilt. When at last the dwarf was free, he sat up, rubbed his arms and legs, and exclaimed, Well, whatever they say, you don't feel like ghosts." Like most dwarfs, he was very stocky and deep-chested. He would have been about 3 feet high if he had been standing up, and an immense beard and whiskers of coarse red hair left little of his face to be seen, except a beak-like nose and twinkling black eyes. "Anyway," he continued, "ghost or not, you saved my life, and I'm extremely obliged to you." "But why would we be ghosts?" asked Lucy. "Well, I've been told all my life," said the dwarf, "that these woods along the shore were as full of ghosts as they were of trees. And that's what the story is, and that's why when they want to get rid of anyone, they usually bring them down here, like they were doing with me, and say, don't leave them to the ghosts. But I always wondered if they didn't really drown them or cut their throats, and I never quite believed in the ghosts. But those two cowards you just shot believed all right. They were more frightened of taking me to my death than I was of going." "Oh," said Susan, "so that's why they both ran away." "Eh, what's that?" said the dwarf. "They got away," said Edmund, "to the mainland." "I wasn't shooting to kill you now," said Susan. She would have not liked anyone to think that she would miss at such a short range. "Huh," said the dwarf. "Well, that's not so good. That may mean trouble later on, unless they hold their tongues for their own sake." "What were they going to drown you for?" asked Peter. "Oh, I'm a dangerous criminal, I am," said the dwarf cheerfully. "But that's a long story. Meantime, I was wondering if perhaps you were going to ask me to breakfast. You've no idea what an appetite it gives one, being executed." "There's only apples," said Lucy dolefully. "Better than nothing, but not so good as fresh fish," said the dwarf. It looks as if I'll have to ask you to breakfast instead. I saw some fishing tackle on that boat, and anyway, we must take her round to the other side of the island. We don't want anyone from the mainland coming down and seeing her." I ought to have thought of that myself," said Peter. The 4 children of the dwarf went down to the water's edge, pushed off the boat with some difficulty, and scrambled aboard. The dwarf at once took charge. The oars were, of course, too big for him to use, so Peter rowed, and the dwarf steered them north along the channel, and presently eastward, round the tip of the island. From here the children could see right up the river, and all the bays and headlands of the coast beyond it. Excuse me. They thought that they could recognize bits of it, but the woods, which had grown up since their time, made everything look very different. When they had come round to an open sea on the east of the island, the dwarf took to fishing. They had an excellent catch of pavenders, a beautiful rainbow-colored fish which they all remembered eating at Cape Paravel in the old days. When they had caught enough, they ran the boat up to a little creek and moored her to a tree. The dwarf, who was a most capable person, and indeed, though one meets bad dwarfs, I never heard of a dwarf who was a fool, cut the fish open, cleaned them, and said, "Now, what we want next is some firewood." "We've got to get some, we got some up the castle," said Edmund. The dwarf gave a low whistle. "Beards and bedsteads," he said. "So there really is a castle after all." "It's only a ruin," said Lucy. The dwarf stared around at all four of them with a very curious expression on his face. "And who on earth—" he began, but then broke off and said, "No matter. Breakfast first. But one thing before we go on. Can you lay your hand on your hearts and tell me I'm really alive? Are you sure I wasn't drowned and we're not all ghosts together?" When they all reassured him, the next question was how to carry the fish. They had nothing to string them on and no basket. They had to use Edmund's hat in the inn because no one else had a hat. He would have made much more fuss about it if he had not by now been so ravenously hungry. At first, the dwarf did not seem very comfortable in the castle. He kept looking around and sniffing and saying, looks like a bit spooky after all. Smells like ghosts, too." But he cheered up when it came to lighting the fire and showing them how to roast the fresh pavenders in the embers. Eating hot fish with no forks and one pocket knife between 5 people is messy business, and there were several burnt fingers before the meal was ended. But as it was now 9 o'clock and they had been up since 5, nobody minded the burn so much as you might have expected. When everyone had finished off with a drink from the well and an apple or so, the dwarf produced a pipe about the size of his own arm, filled it, lit it, blew a great cloud of fragrant smoke, and said, "Now, you tell us your story first," said Peter, "and then we'll tell you ours." "Well," said the dwarf, "as you saved my life, it is only fair you should have your own way. But I hardly know where to begin. First of all, I'm a messenger of King Caspian's." "Who's he?" asked all 4 voices at once. "Caspian, the 10th king of Narnia, and long may he reign," answered the dwarf. "That is to say, he ought to be the king of Narnia, but we hope he will be. At present, he is only king of us old Narnians." "What do you mean by old Narnians, please?" asked Lucy. "Why, that's us," said the dwarf. "We're a kind of rebellion, I suppose." "I see," said Peter, "and the Caspian is the chief old Narnian." "Well, in a manner of speaking," said the dwarf, scratching his head. "But he's really a new Narnian himself, a Telmarine, if you follow me." "I don't," said Edmund. It's worse than the Roar of the Roses," said Lucy. "Oh dear," said the dwarf. "I'm doing this very badly. Look here, I think I'll have to go right back to the beginning and tell you how Caspian grew up to his uncle's court, and how he comes to be on our side at all. But it'll be a long story." "All the better," said Lucy. "We love stories." So the dwarf settled down and told his tale. I shall not give it to you in his words, putting it all in the children's questions and interruptions, because it would take too long and be too confusing, and even so it would leave out some points that the children only heard later. But the gist of the story, as I knew it in the end, was as follows. End of chapter 3. Yeah, sorry, Twix. I don't mean to do this to you. Will you come here for petting Twix? Do not refuse to eat mine. Nice using one. Gotta get off this island. Everyone I'm lost. I agree. Except John. I understood the reference. I never really watched it. Oh yeah, you're in Chicago, right? Don't know how I forgot your time zone. It's true. I hope you enjoy your food. The Return of the Shoulder Soldiers. I'm having some nerd read for me. It's appropriate, I guess. Us cheerleaders would never survive without our servants. Well, that's strange. Thanks for being here, Misfit, Blondie. I don't think you're still here. I don't know. Shoulder soldiers, said Shasta. Am I alive? Okay, now what to do about the fish? I'm back once we went to bed, so I'm here now. Correct order of things. Welcome back, Tom. Welcome back, Tom. Welcome back, Paige, as well. How is the food? Class for chapter 3. Good chapter reading. Thank you, thank you. Okay, phone, I get it. Excellent chapter 3 reading, Tara. Thank you. Welcome to the awesome group. Nah, I don't like it. Is Misfit Blondie even here anymore? I have no idea. That was very strange. Hi, Caw. Hi, Caw name. Hi, Caw text. There we go. It's hot and let it sit for a second. Okay, I hope it's enjoyable when you can eat it. It's superficial to have a face cam now. It's very nice to tear. Well, thank you. I don't know how often I'm going to use it. Maybe just for read streams. Too much of a hassle to do it when I'm playing games. That was strange. Well, it was nice for her to pop in, even for a couple seconds. Nice for her to imply that I was a servant, too. That's cool. Oh, well. No big deal. Welcome back, Caw. But Terra Face is nice to have every stream. We'll see. I have not decided on that yet. It wasn't odd stop by. We talked about a face reveal for a brief second the other day. I remember kind of talking about that. You were prepared for the timeout. I appreciate that. Yes, indeedy. I don't know. I didn't know how that was going to go. I wasn't sure if it was going to go like downhill as I was continuing on. When I first saw it, it was confusing. But I appreciate you looking out ready. How very confusing. How vexing. Alright, I don't remember. I remember that you sent me a Snapchat that was just, I hope you had fun with Victoria and Rob at New Year's Eve. And that was like the only thing I can remember about face reveals. I mean, I was prepared to be mean. Was there a mean person? It looked like they were heading that way. I don't know, like they were walking a fine line, I guess. Like it could have been taken as a joke. I don't know. I didn't take any offense to it, honestly, because I am a nerd. But I don't know. It's also weird the other day when these two people came in my chat and started flirting with each other. Well, that's strange as well. I'll eat them. Well, I appreciate that, Caw Evie. It looked like they were probably going to be horrible, but they didn't stick around long enough to be horrible. I don't know. I shouldn't judge people before I fully got to know them. But not the best start. Well, yeah, they called me a nerd. They called me a nerd, and then they implied that since I'm streaming and reading, I was a servant to them. Because they were a cheerleader, I guess? I think they didn't continue talking because they got no reaction. I mean, I don't care. People can call me nerd as much as they want. Doesn't bother me. You're too smart. Let's see how long this chapter is. That'll take me yeah. I'm fond of nerds and geeks because I'm a nerd and geek. Wait, like, actually, they do realize that Twitch is a gaming platform, right? Well, apparently I don't realize it either because I'm reading a book. But yeah, I get what you mean.